but I know your start in politics was maybe a little more colorful than you let on here. Tell us about that. And then also working in college football, you kind of glossed through that.
Yeah.
That's a big deal that a lot of our listeners are like, wow, he worked for a major college football program.
Look,
Tell us a little bit about both.
Well, on the campaign signs, I don't know how I learned this, but you can knock over as many as you want, and it's only a misdemeanor. It's a felony if you steal them.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Golf and Politics. We are broadcasting today from Tour Quality Golf in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we are very thankful. Another sponsor of the show, the Synapse Group, owned by Jefferson Thomas, joining us today. Jefferson, thanks for believing in the show. Thanks for hosting this event tonight. We'll get some B-roll footage of this. We've got guys here playing Quail Hollow, preview of the PGA Championship to come. Of course, you've played.
Mm-hmm.
You've never played virtual golf.
I've never played virtual golf.
So we're going to go head-to-head tonight.
I haven't played a video game since 1996. I had a PlayStation 2, and that was like Madden, NBA Jam, and like WWF wrestling. But so this is honestly brand new to me. So.
That's good. Well, Rob and I played earlier, 9 holes, 9 questions at LaFortune Park, the par 3 course.
Tulsa's finest, baby.
He beat me, fell apart at the end. He was steady as can be, made a lot of pars and won the match. So we're happy for Rob, but I look forward to trying to get some revenge tonight at Quail Hollow when we play on the simulator. But Jefferson, thanks for joining the show. And you've been on before, 9 holes, 9 questions, but we want to get a little deeper tonight with you about your business and just also thanks for sponsoring the show again and give you an opportunity just to tell us a little bit more about yourself and where did you grow up, where are you from, and you're new to Tulsa, but where did you grow up?
Yeah, I mean, first off, thanks for having me. Great show. Great intersection of two of my passions, politics and golf, right? So when I heard that golf and politics was going to be a thing that was podcasted about multiple times a week for an hour in a long form, bunch of different contributors, I was super excited. So I think this is great. If you're not a sponsor, make sure you sign up for a sponsorship. I grew up in small town Missouri, little town Mexico, Missouri, home of former Senator Kit Bond. And right before high school, we moved to Jefferson City. My mom took a job as the chief of staff in the Missouri Senate to the agriculture chairman back then. And so we moved to Jeff City that would have been 2006. My family's been from there ever since then. Graduated high school on a Sunday. I went to Catholic school, and so graduation was on Sunday. And on Monday, I moved to Western Kansas and worked in the Big First. Ended up losing a primary to Tim Huell's camp back in the day. Jerry Moran was running for U.S. Senate, and back in the heyday of Club for Growth and some of the more conservative groups really getting started, we lost a primary.
I feel like 2010. 2010, okay.
2010, and so did that. Realized that maybe at some point I should get a college degree. I wasn't super sold on college then. Was not your model student, if that surprises anyone. But went back to the University of Missouri, ended up working for the football team, which was a great experience, especially for what I'm doing now in terms of operations, logistics, herding 115, 120 people into some place that some people don't want to be. You know, football players didn't want to go to class. Signature gatherers don't always want to gather signatures. There's a lot of similarities. And so did that until I moved to Colorado in 2015 to take a job with the RNC as the deputy state director, and then lived in Colorado until I met Mr. Parker and a few other folks here in Oklahoma and got the family to make the move. So we moved down here about 9 months ago. And so it's been great to be back in red-blooded America with some people who view the world a little more like me.
Before we get to these questions, I got to tell you about meeting Jefferson for the first time. So I'm in the direct mail business and we have printers all over the country. One of my printers is in Denver and I needed to go out, check out some new technology they had at the print shop, do a meeting with my vendor. And I'm like, if I'm flying to Denver for one meeting, I ought to pile in a few other meetings. So I talked to Stephanie Alexander, who's my business partner, and I talked to my former business partner, PJ Wenzel. His brother used to live in Colorado. I said, who else should I meet while I'm in Colorado? And Stephanie's like, you need to meet this guy, Jefferson Thomas. And then Alex Wenzel said, you need to meet this guy, Jefferson Thomas. They both said that. So I call Mr. Thomas and set up the meeting, and he wasn't very friendly on the phone. And yeah, I'll meet you. How about 7 a.m. for breakfast? I'm like, fine, 7 a.m. for breakfast. So he drives like an hour to meet for a 7 a.m. breakfast, and he was a little bit standoffish. And as soon as I
These
found
mail
out,
guys, right? They're like a dime a dozen. Like I was getting calls every day from the mail guy. So sure, come on down.
yeah, but I got there, and as soon as I found out he liked to play golf, he went from being kind of standoffish to, we talked golf the whole time, and next thing you know, we're playing golf at in Palm Springs, and then he invites me out for his member guest in Colorado. Now we're members of the same club. We're members of this club here, this indoor club. So it's been a great relationship.
It was a game changer.
What did I never do in that meeting though?
Never once tried to sell me on mail, which after 10 minutes of not selling me on mail and talking about golf, it was a different relationship than all of the other direct mail vendors who had rolled through
I guess
town.
you got to do the direct mail
Guess who did
last
the
year for
direct
his
mail?
big client, so it was good. It all worked out. Well, I know you got a question. Why don't you kick it off here? Let's get through our questions here, because we have multiple podcasts we're going to do tonight in this Politics and Pod event.
I want to know about the name Jefferson Thomas. What were your parents thinking, and how often do you get Thomas Jefferson?
So my parents still to this day maintain innocence. We weren't trying to make it political. We just wanted something you could shorten if you didn't like going by Jefferson. Benjamin or Jonathan or anything normal wouldn't have been shortenable, right? But we picked Jefferson. So, I guess at some point I've just looked at it and I've been like, yeah, okay, you're lying, but we'll continue down the path of letting you think you did me a service. It didn't click for me a ton until second grade, and you walk in and everybody's got the little nameplate on the desk to learn where you're sitting, right? And everybody else's name was like first name, last name, Matthew Parker, Rob Ellsworth. Mine says Thomas Jefferson. And then at that point was when I kind of realized, okay, this is just something you're probably going to accept the rest of your life. But, in our line of work, we all travel a lot, right? And so my new favorite thing has been just watching and like handing at the airport the waiter or the waitress the credit card and waiting for them to look down and look up and be like, oh, Jefferson Thomas, like, and I'm like, oh, first joke of the day, like, only every single day. So
Well, it couldn't be political unless they're trying to get at the modern Federalists, or maybe they were worried that.
yeah, small town Missouri. I don't know if you asked my parents that they could go to the modern Federalists. Like that wasn't a thing in 1991. It was
Yeah.
like, William Jefferson Clinton was the president when I was born. So, could have been a tribute.
It could be a tribute.
Arkansas's finest.
You might have trouble getting cast in Hamilton, the musical.
Yeah.
So Jefferson, you talked a little bit about your career trajectory, but I know your start in politics was maybe a little more colorful than you let on here. Tell us about that. And then also working in college football, you kind of glossed through that.
Yeah.
That's a big deal that a lot of our listeners are like, wow, he worked for a major college football program.
Look,
Tell us a little bit about both.
So we'll start with politics. So my mom's working in Missouri politics, started on campaigns. My mom's actually very, very well established. Worked on the Katherine Harris for U.S. Senate campaign in Florida, lost to Bill Nelson in 2006. Worked on several statewide campaigns, worked for Congressman Kenny Holsoff back in the day in Missouri, until she, kind of decided that this stable ledge staffer life was a better thing. Now she's the chief of staff in the state Senate, to the Senate president. But she was working at the time, she was running a PAC called Better Leadership for Missouri. And there was a bachelor lieutenant governor by the name of Peter Kinder, had never been married. And they couldn't really find somebody who wanted to staff him all the time, if you will. And so going through the names, going through the resumes, couldn't find anybody. And so as the story's been told to me, it's kind of a two-part qualification. Can he drive the car as fast as he's told? Well, if you tell him to drive the car fast, I'm sure he will. And can he keep his mouth shut? And she was like, well, if you tell him to keep his mouth shut, I'm sure he can keep his mouth shut. So that was kind of the interview process that started me. So going to Catholic school, they always believed in these real world applications of life, right? And so like there was a Tour of Missouri bike race that the state used to hold 7 days, stages all across the state to hire it. Lance Armstrong's team, George Hincapie, tons of famous cyclists riding in it. And I would go and staff the lieutenant governor for all 7 days and go back and do my schoolwork at night. But that part was extremely helpful to me as you're going through kind of this academic career and you're learning about government and you're learning about application. It was not helpful to my freshman government teacher at the University of Missouri because he wanted to teach you how the book said things should be done. And I was still in this spot where raising your hand and correcting him on the way the real world of it worked was going to be done. So we agreed that I wouldn't come to class and I would get a C+ and it would all work out. And so I showed up on test day, took the test, got a C+, and we didn't embarrass Professor Dow too bad.
That's good.
This was right. That was right when redistricting was going on. And so he's like, well, they're going to equally draw the maps, and they're just going to equally divide people. I was like, my mom's on the redistricting committee, and I'm
So you
pretty
were like
sure.
you were like the Alex P. Keaton
Yes.
in class.
Yes. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure I talked to my mom yesterday, and I heard we were trading Senate seat A for Senate seat B. So sure, we're evenly drawing the map. Sounds great. Whatever you want to think. But then college football, I mean, Gary Pinkel, Andy Hill, David Yost were all huge mentors in my life. I actually was a ball boy back when they used to have summer camp in Mexico, Missouri, back when college football players used to get put up in dorm type settings and taken away for, 2.5 weeks, and 2-a-days were still a thing. There was real 2 practices, 4 days in a row. And so I'd stay close with those guys and told them I needed something to do while I was in school. And so that was kind of my job. But worked with quarterbacks like Blaine Gabbert, James Franklin, Matty Mock, worked with the receivers, and was just blessed that, Gary Pinkel really had a program that was rolling, that was doing some great things. I was there for the transition from the Big 12 to the SEC. And so our first year in the SEC, people don't remember, 2012, was not exactly a banner year. It was the first time in I don't know, 8-9 years that we had missed a bowl game. We went 5-7, lost to Syracuse at home, the second to last game of the season, and then we got torched down in College Station by Johnny Manziel and his Heisman campaign. But in 13 and 14, our second and third year in the SEC, Mizzou actually won the SEC East Division both years, and so got to go to the SEC championship game both times. Lost to Cam Newton in Auburn in 2013, and then lost to a Nick Saban team that I believe won the national championship in 2014. And then ended up going to the Cotton Bowl, beat Oklahoma State in the Cotton Bowl in 2013, and then went to the Citrus Bowl in 2014 and beat Minnesota in the Citrus Bowl. But just the exposure I had and the trust that those guys put in me to really take on meaningful tasks and do meaningful things for the team was something, again, that in my business career now, we always try and empower new people when we hire them to do cool things and, grow and give them as much responsibility as they can handle. But also, I think in politics, you guys have experienced this. Like, at some point when you're starting, it's a little bit of a grind, right? Like, you just got to be demonstrating that you're willing to put in the hours. The team playing used to come home from road games at, 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 2 a.m. There were still 2 or 3 hours of paperwork that needed to be done before we could watch film the next morning. And so you just learn that at some point, shit's got to get done and somebody's got to do it. So raise your hand to do it.
He mentioned Catherine Harris. I have a great Catherine Harris story. So this is from when I was working for NAY at Committee of House Administration, my Republican days. And Congresswoman Catherine Harris was leaving office. I forget if she won another seat or lost. I forget why she was leaving Congress. But
to get appointed Secretary of State, probably.
So she
was Secretary of State, and then she got into Congress, and then she was running for the Senate.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's leaving Congress, leaving the House, and reached out to me personally at the House Administration Committee because she wanted to personally buy her desk in her congressional office. So I'm flipping through the rules and the manuals, and I go to George Hajiski, and I'm like, George, what the hell do we charge her? And he says, there's no rule on it. We're Congress, you decide. So I start going online to see what desks cost.
Oh my gosh.
And then I just made up a number. I called her back and I said, well, Congressman, we believe this is the appropriate price for the desk. She said, no problem. Dropped off a check. I don't even remember who the check was made out to or if we cashed it. I took care of the deal.
That's a good deal.
She got her.
The orange juice heiress needs another desk, huh?
She needed another desk. And I came up with the price and handled the transaction completely out of my ass. Had no idea.
It's shocking she didn't win the U.S. Senate seat.
It's shocking.
All right. Jefferson, your website for the Synapse Group says the Synapse Group partners with individuals, campaigns, and corporations across the country to provide world-class solutions to challenges presented in the government, public affairs, and campaign spaces.
That is correct.
What exactly do you really do, though, in layman's terms, fifth grade terms?
Fifth grade terms, we have quickly grown to be one of the largest providers of labor. And fifth grade terms, we employ the Cutco salesman of politics to go either door to door or location to location, and we'll either provide center-right candidates, center-right causes, the labor to knock on those doors, or actually a larger part of our business is petition signatures. And so candidates need, in some states, need signatures to get on the ballot. A lot of times referendums or ballot initiatives need signatures to gain access to the ballot if they can't get through the legislative process. We charge our clients to provide that service of bodies going out and collecting those signatures or knocking on those doors.
Now, I don't know how this could possibly be done in Washington, D.C., because if someone knocks on my door, I feel like the world is ending. But I know people are nicer here. But still, today, like, someone knocks on your door, whether you're a candidate or somebody doing field work, like, how many doors do you need to knock on? Like, if you need 700 signatures, how many doors would you need to knock on? Because you're obviously going to get some people who are like, get the hell out of here. Like, if you don't have pizza or beer, like, why are you at my door?
Signatures is harder to do door to door, right? A lot of times just because of the volume that you'd like to do in an hour or over a duration of a shift. So a lot of times we're focused on public libraries, DMVs, places where you can't really tell someone to not come. And so set up a little table, put a little poster up talking about what the issue is, and then kind of let people who are inclined to come by flow through, if you will. But doors, you're right. I mean, we've seen probably over the last 10 years, not necessarily through our company, but just in my experience through watching other metrics that other firms were generating when I was more on the management side of the projects. I was more of the client. You've seen a decline in engagement. But it really depends on who you're talking to. It's amazing when you have a good dialed in data project that knows who should be a gettable voter and maybe just needs a little communication with. We see engagement rates go through the roof. When it's a little broader shotgun approach and we're maybe trying to use doors to figure out who the target is, then you'll kind of see that engagement die back off. And a lot of people, oh, I can't believe you're representing that person, slammed the door in your face. But where we have projects that a data firm has come in and done the micro targeting and kind of told us these should be gettable voters, we see pretty fair response rates.
I even freak out when a friend calls me instead of texts me now. That's if somebody actually calls me and I'm like, oh, something must be wrong, or they would have just texted.
They would have just sent a text, yeah.
Is it different engaging and finding folks with younger voters more so than?
Actually, we see more success probably the little older they get. So once you start to break that kind of 50, 55 clip, I mean, it's very hard to do this, but in a situation where we have enough kind of targets to go knock, we love between the hours of 9 and noon talking to our retired voters. I mean, there's a reason campaigns still send direct mail, right? And it's because there's a subset of people who love to go check the mailbox every day and flip through every piece of paper that's in it. Those same people look forward at some point to somebody coming by their door and just having a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And so really training your canvassers to understand you might have an elderly person and this is what they're wanting out of that interaction. You might have a middle-aged mom who's just in a rush. And so get to the point, make your pitch and move on. And then you've got a younger person who you've got to engage in a different way, more as a peer. That's something that goes into the training of your canvassers and your employees that really makes a difference in terms of the quality of the response you're going to get on a project once applied door by door.
Got it.
Let me tell you, I've hired Jefferson's firm for multiple projects, and there's somebody here tonight. So if you hear all the golf balls being hit, we're at Jordan, make sure they're seeing what's going on here. People are playing Quail Hollow on TrackMan. There's a consultant here who doesn't know that this happened. I was running an independent effort for one of his clients here in Oklahoma, hired your firm to go knock doors, and they were so effective. They literally had over 100 voters in a state Senate district say, I want to take her sign out of my yard, take it down. And they were trained to say, we can't touch her sign.
Touch signs.
But
No
our
signs, no
messaging
mailboxes.
was so good and so effective with Jefferson's people on the ground, aggressively going after these doors, that over 100 of her supporters are taking signs now. So you can imagine if you're running a state Senate race in Oklahoma and it's
In
a
a
runoff election, low turnout, and you're only talking about 65,000 people in a Senate district in Oklahoma. So not a lot of voters. And you start seeing your signs coming down throughout the district in a suburban district, you're freaked out. You're absolutely freaked out. You're getting people calling saying, I didn't know that you supported this, this, and this. And now you're playing defense trying to protect your people. It was the best use of resources, in my opinion, that as an independent expenditure, we could do that didn't interfere with the campaign, but obviously helped that
Well,
campaign.
I think that's a great example too of we had quality data,
Yeah.
and we had quality messaging, and we had quality. So
But you also gave us quality canvassers too. I think that was helpful there. You know, having people that could aggressively go and deliver a confrontational type of message at the doorstep was helpful.
So that's, I would say, one thing that we pride ourselves on, and I've especially built a company on. We are not, as much as we like to say we're the Cutco salesman of politics, we're not trying to sell knives to everybody. We have a limited amount of signatures that we're going to do per cycle. We have a limited amount of doors that we're going to do per cycle. And that's because access to quality labor who can make an impact and deliver those impactful conversations. That's not every, Tom, Dick, and Harry that you recruit off the side of a street and you sign them up.
Right.
And so there's other firms that will never say no to a contract, and as long as the price is right, they'll take it and they'll figure out how to source the labor. We've actually had to start, kind of adjusting some things to let people know, like, we're going to have a labor shortage at our firm at some point throughout the duration of this 25-26 cycle. And so if you'd like to lock in our folks, we'd love to make an agreement now. But I just think that is something that, especially our political consumers, have to understand is the amount of people who can be trained and who really understand how to have an impactful conversation. That's not everyone, right? And that's not everyone's skill set. And so that's why we're going to sell a certain amount of doors. And once we hit that, we're at capacity. Sorry, probably similar to you. You can only print so many mail pieces, right? And
Yeah.
after that, you just can't print more.
I thought he said cuckold salesman.
No, not today. I mean,
I don't know.
I guess if there's a client in Wyoming, we're happy to have or not Wyoming, Nevada. We're happy to have a discussion. But
Yeah.
Well, on the campaign signs, I don't know how I learned this, but you can knock over as many as you want, and it's only a misdemeanor. It's a felony if you steal them.
So here's my favorite sign story. 2011, I'm working a House of Delegates race in Virginia for a guy named David Ramadan. David owned a ton of franchises of curves over in Europe and the Middle East. Was kind of his calling. But it's right outside of Washington, D.C., Loudoun County, Virginia.
Yeah.
South Riding is the neighborhood. Can't afford television when you run for state rep.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care how much money you raise.
Yeah.
It's out of DC Metro. So what you do is you just buy a ton of yard signs and a ton of 4x8s. And, in DC, they have these parkways. So it's like 2-lane road going east and this nice center area with some trees and grass, and a 2-lane road going west. Me and another guy, we'd just drive around and, we'd put out 100 yard signs over a mile stretch. And then we'd skip 2 miles and we'd put out 100 yard signs. We'd skip a couple miles, put out 100 yard signs. We ended up winning that. It was the tightest House of Delegates race by, I think it was like 90 votes, maybe, in that general election. But at one point, Rob's friends on the left, the labor unions, were volunteering themselves to
They
go out
love
and
me.
take.
I think they might like Trump more than they like you.
But they were
love me.
taking down our signs. And so we actually got a mention on the Rush Limbaugh show back in the day. Fresh out of Loudoun County, Virginia union workers taking down Republican candidate yard signs. You'll never
And
believe the
stealing
video
Christmas.
we saw, folks. And
Did we steal Christmas too?
no, we won. But so that's our sign claim to fame at the Synapse Group is Rush
All right.
Limbaugh talks
So
about our
Jefferson,
signs.
a little serious topic here. The Oklahoma legislature, there's a movement afoot there. It's passed out of committee, I believe, in the House to change the law regarding how signatures can be collected for a citizen initiative petition, for a statutory change to the law, or a constitutional amendment. You have worked with me before on getting signatures for a citizen initiative petition.
Yeah.
And now those laws are changing, right? I believe, well, they haven't changed yet.
Haven't changed yet, but
it's looking very likely.
looks like dear leader Stitt will choose to impose his will yet again.
And so, and I believe the reasoning for this is that out-of-state interests, ACLU, pro-choice organizations have the resources to come into Oklahoma and spend millions of dollars and put things on the ballot that the Republican-controlled legislature and Republican governor don't want to see passed. And so I get the politics of the whole thing. But how will that affect your business? With states that become more restrictive like that, do you just tend to stay out of?
No.
Or you just find ways to...
All it's going to do is make it more expensive to the end consumer. But like thinking you're ever going to price the ACLU or Emily's List out of running a pro-choice initiative,
Or
like,
conservative groups
or
that want to pay to stop things or
Correct.
whatever.
Like all you're really doing is putting more money in people's pockets, but you're not like you could tell Emily's List is going to cost $5 million. You could tell Emily's List is going to cost $25 million. If they want to get the signatures on the ballot, I mean, I don't know what they raise a year, but it's well north of that being a prohibitive factor, right? So that's what any of these Oklahoma legislators who have kind of asked me my opinion, I'm like, can you change the law? Sure. Like go do whatever you guys want. But is this going to fundamentally change the, like what does and doesn't make the ballot? No, actually all you're probably doing is empowering out of state special interest a little more in the initiative petition process. Because anything that's truly Oklahoma driven is probably going to struggle more to raise the resources to professionally get something done to get it on the ballot than a national group is.
Okay.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
At some point, whether it's the Oklahoma Realtors and the National Realtors or the Oklahoma Pro-Choice Group versus the National Pro-Choice Group, now both of those Oklahoma chapters are going to need the national entities even more than they would have had they just left the rules the same. But fundamentally, it's still going to get on the ballot.
Well, I want to close this. Usually with our guests, we do the shotgun 9. You've been on the show before, did 9 holes, 9 questions. We're not going to do a shotgun 9 today. We're going to do something special. But the last question I have before we get into that is golf, hunting, fishing, SEC football, politics, all passions.
Yep.
You can't quit politics. That's what puts food on the table.
Food on the table.
But golf, SEC football, hunting, and fishing. You only had to choose one of those hobbies for the rest of your life. What's that going to be?
I mean, look, it probably depends on the quality of my golf game at the time, right? Like, so if I keep 3-putting,
The
as
way
much
you're
as I
hitting
have
the new
been,
QI35 driver, you're probably going to be playing a lot of golf.
I will play a lot of golf as long as
Ross
she is
McDonald, who we're going to have later, is fit him for this QI35, and he is smoking it. It's fantastic to watch.
Ross has built me a great set, and those guys have done just an amazing job not changing my swing, which is like, God, I'm an old trained dog here. Like, don't change the dog, change the club the dog swings, right? So, I love to hunt and fish. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's one thing that just is peaceful to me, it's turning my phone off as soon as election ends and going out to a duck blind and just sitting there for 7 hours in the morning and enjoying nature. And I'm actually in the process of trying to acquire some land up by north of Bartlesville, up by Copan. And so that'd probably be the one thing I actually couldn't give up. Not a lot of people, they meet me and they think, oh, this political vendor and what have you. But I would much rather be in a deer stand than at a political dinner having to sell something. But like you said, can't quit politics and can't quit selling because that's what puts food on the table. So,
well, good thing it's a hypothetical question because I can't lose my golfing buddy. All right, here's what we're doing. For the last 9 minutes of this podcast, Rob has a lot of grievances with President Trump. We got a lot of disagreements. I'm setting a timer because this will turn into a 3-hour podcast if I don't set a timer.
This is also a running tradition of Rob arguing with financial backers
Yeah, I
of
mean,
the podcast.
exactly. We have people that are,
Yeah.
we had Casey Lang, our first sponsor of the program, and the whole episode became Rob telling Casey how wrong he was on everything. I'm like, dude, he's the guy,
I didn't tell him how wrong Casey was. I told him how wrong the tariffs are.
All right, here we go. 9 minutes political debate before we end this podcast, and we've started. All right. Well, you're the one with the grievances, so we're happy with President Trump. So why don't you go and bring up grievances, and we can debate those.
Okay. We were all Republicans 15 years ago. I'm calling myself a former Republican. And one of the driving forces of my Republicanism was a belief in market economics, which I still believe in, a belief in trade, a belief in reasonable immigration policies. Where do you stand on this, not just the tariffs and a global trade war, but basically hitting 180 countries at once, including Botswana and Madagascar? We saw the market drop another 3% today. We saw the president back off this policy, 3 or 4 days into it, largely because he got spooked by the bond markets. Now, there are a lot of jock-sniffing Trump supporters who will say, oh, this was all part of the plan, 4D chess all along. But we know better. I'm not a 4D chess guy. I can't count 4D chess. 3D chess is
But what I will say, I do think if you've read The Art of the Deal, Donald Trump tells you exactly how he handles negotiations in the book, right?
Well, the person who wrote it for him.
Well, no, that was Joe Biden and all of his laws, but I think Donald Trump.
Joe
wrote his
Biden's
own
not
book.
president. Yeah,
He was,
but he's
but
not.
the auto pen ran the White
But,
House.
but when he left, the Dow was at 4,500. Today it closed at 37 and change.
At some point, and look, I'm
45,000.
not an economist here, but do we really believe that the Dow was going to be able to continue with this? I believe paper money that was being printed on a Dow, but what, like, gains weren't being realized. Americans' paychecks aren't going up near to the level of retirement accounts and home values. I mean, look, I've been the beneficiary of this, right? I buy a house in Colorado for $600,000. I live in it for 18 months, and I sell the house for $820,000. But like, is that really sustainable for the American economy when wages didn't go up anywhere close to the same percentage?
Well, it is sustainable if you rein in spending, which Doge is not doing, and if you raise taxes, and if you have a stable monetary policy without pressure from the White House to lower interest rates. If the problem is higher prices, tariffs will only make them go up higher because tariffs are a tax. So either the company pays them or eats the cost.
But the consumer pays
or
them
it's-
in the end.
Or it's a pass through to the consumer. So it makes the costs of all goods and services go up. The point I keep coming back to is that the United States has 4% of the world's population and over half the world's wealth. The idea that it is a pro-growth strategy to close ourselves off to the movement of goods, people, services, etc., and that we're somehow going to grow that percentage in a direct conflict with China, in my mind, is ludicrous. Now, of course, we need immigration laws. Of course, we need to enforce our borders. Nobody with half a brain is for completely open borders. I mean, those are political talking points that get a lot of legs.
Okay, let me just interrupt then. Then let's if that's the case, then we should all stop right now and say that President Trump has done a good job at stopping border crossings because they've come next to nothing. People are not flowing into the United States like they were.
I'll give you this. I think that when President Biden came in, and I think he had such a focus on being everything Trump wasn't. The same way Trump wanted to be the opposite of Obama and now the opposite of Biden. I think that his executive order on the border was a mistake. And you saw illegal crossings spike under his watch. And I think that's a big reason why he lost.
This is huge. This is massive
No,
for
no,
our show.
but-
We're agreeing on something of real importance here.
No, I've said this in prior episodes. I think it's one of the big reasons Trump won this election. But about a year and a half, 2 years into this flawed mistake, which I think if I was Kamala Harris, the first thing I would have said when they asked me, what would you do differently?
I wouldn't have signed up to be the border czar.
I wouldn't have signed up, which is a losing proposition. Like,
Also wouldn't have gone on The View and said, there's nothing I would have done different than Joe Biden. That was,
fine. But they ended up reversing the executive order and illegal border crossings plummeted before Trump came back into office. So, you can say inflation spiked, border crossings spiked, but when Trump took office January 20th, inflation was back under 2%. And border crossings were back to a lower point than what they were when Trump left office the first time. And a big reason why border crossings dropped during COVID was because it tracks how the economy's doing. If the U.S. economy is in a deep recession, there are fewer border crossings. If we're humming along,
Everybody wants to come.
more people are trying to get here. The next point is actually an issue that came up today, and I think is something that is very popular in the religious communities, evangelical communities, is the president is now coming up with different policies to try to increase the birth rate amongst American families. They're trying to encourage more young people to get married, more young people to have babies, more people to have more babies. My question would be, well, I guess you wouldn't need to do that if you weren't trying to kick everybody out, because immigration is what separates us from China and Japan and other countries with aging populations. Because we have immigration, and because if you come here legally, you follow the rules, you're an American, you're in the club.
We all agree on that, 1,000%.
But my problem with this policy is I was also a Republican because I believed in limited government, individual liberty, and not overly prescriptive government. Things that I often disagree with Democrats on in other parts of other issues. Why the hell should the President of the United States and the Congress be trying to legislate and sign into law policies to incentivize people to get married and have more kids and grow the why is that the government's business? And how on earth is this going to work?
Look, I'm not familiar with what happened on that. I didn't read that today or what have you. But I think any policies that we have as a government that promotes being pro-child, I'm for it. I'm for growing our country through people having children and us investing in our children. I'd want to see good schools and our country flourish that way. I also want to see more immigration. I mean, I do want to see more immigration in this country. I just want to see it done legally and the people vetted that are coming in. I don't want MS-13 gang members coming to our country.
What I see, and this is with people my age and younger, I think the percentage of people not getting married and having fewer kids has more to do with money, in that there are a lot of people who just can't afford to get married, who can't afford their first house, who can't afford childcare, they can't afford education, for their kids. It's an economic issue to me more than a social issue.
But I want to go back. So
Would you disagree with that?
Look, I mean, I would say my wife and I got married in 2017, and we did wait to have kids until our little girl's 20 months old now, so almost 2. And that was partially out of wanting to make sure that we were in a better economic spot than we were. Now, I was also, working 80 hours a week and wasn't home multiple times, and some of those things that we knew, if you were going to have a successful family unit, needed to happen, right? Your child needed a present father, wife needed a present support system. But yeah, we've heard from friends our age that can I afford to have a third or a fourth child compared to a second? But I also, to your point, I don't know, for some reason there are certain incentives in government for you to have 1 or 2 kids, but maybe not the third or the fourth kid.
Well, part of this stems
and so
from...
Are we going to have no incentives to have any kids, or are we going to make it a per kid incentive regardless of the amount of kids we choose to have? If you want to have 12, we'll give you the same incentive as 1, right? But the other thing I want to go back to, 180 countries, a trade war, etc., right? Look, I don't think anybody would disagree that China's been screwing America, not only on a true tariff or a VAT or some of those things, but stealing of intellectual property, forced labor that is a lower wage than Americans can ever provide over there. So let's take China out of it. At some point, let's look at our friends in Europe. We provide their national defense. They take advantage of American companies, whether it's a VAT or a tariff, same thing on a tax ratio relative, and we've incurred a national debt that is not sustainable. What are we going to... We can't, as a country, pay the credit card bill and be the world's force for peace and get taken advantage of on trade deals. I think you heard this from Elon Musk. What if we go to a true free trade agreement across Europe, 0 for 0, and we continue to... Then they still get the benefit of the United States being the only reason that Russia doesn't run them all right now.
I have 4 or 5 things I want to put right on that.
We're way over 9 minutes already.
No,
let's wind it down because we do have to record more.
I have 4 or 5 points I want to make on that quickly. One is Elon Musk has said 2 things recently that I agree with. One, that David Navarro, the chief architect of the tariffs, is dumber than a sack of bricks. And he is. 2,
no argument here.
2, I agree with him on getting to free trade policies. But that's not what this president is seeking to do, because the president is saying, 1, our goal here is to raise revenue to pay down the debt. Well, what he's forgetting is that when we had a tariff system like that, we didn't have a national income tax. So unless he's planning on completely getting rid of the national income tax,
God willing.
the bifurcated structure,
Which
does
he
not-
has mentioned.
He has mentioned.
He has mentioned he'd like to
but-
see us
No,
get rid of
but
that.
I
in the
don't
mean-
think that's realistic.
in the
right?
mean-
That takes an act of Congress.
But
You
in the
can't do anything.
but
I
in
agree.
the meantime, real business owners are going to have to live under both structures, an income tax and a tariff structure. So they're going to eat the cost or pass it to their customer. When it comes to overall trade deficits, there's a big difference between a trade deficit and the national deficit, the federal deficit. I would argue that the greatest beneficiary of global trade is without question, from start to finish, the United States of America. And there's a reason for this. Look at the tariffs placed on Botswana and on Madagascar. Why would you hit Botswana with a 30% tariff? Trump says they're ripping us off. Here's what's happening in Botswana. Botswana has diamonds. We don't. We want to buy their diamonds, and we're willing to pay for their diamonds. Their people are poor. They can't buy our shit in return. It does not matter. Yet we drilled them with a 30% tariff. They respond in kind. We're just going to pay more for diamonds. Similar principle in Madagascar and many other countries. So when we look at this global system, what he fails to bring up is that we have the largest trade surplus in services. We're talking about higher education, $5 billion a year, one industry of students coming here. Overall, it's roughly $2 trillion. Tourism, we're absolutely kicking the rest of the world's ass. So we don't have an overall trade deficit. And manufacturing, yes, but we've seen manufacturing increase in the U.S. over the last 4 years because of investments. My problem with the tariff
Not because of
structure-
Trump's
my-
policies during his first term at all.
No, he was a complete unadulterated failure.
Oh,
He was the first president since Herbert Hoover to leave office with fewer jobs than when he came in.
well,
His
COVID had something to do with
Yeah,
that.
his handling of it
Manufacturing's
was an
moving here.
embarrassment. That's why he lost his reelection. And by the way, he lost. So when we look at global trade, when you try to hit 180 countries at once, what's the strategy? Because Matt's strategy.
But here's my question. Going back to the book, The Art of the Deal, because I didn't finish it.
Yeah.
Do we really think he's trying to hit 180 countries, or do we think that he starts out with 180 countries, and by the time he reins it in to 10 countries?
Oh, we shall see. And
I mean,
that's the
the
big
Art
thing,
of
that
the
we
Deal
shall
is
see.
that you shoot big, and then you come
you
in
know-
with something
do you
that
know who's-
people say is unrealistic, and all of a sudden it's became realistic
you know who-
because you went even bigger on the front
Do you
end.
know who's betting against the art of the deal besides me?
American investors.
The stock market, the bond market, the Federal Reserve, which, by the way, is chaired by someone he appointed and is
He's
now
about
an
to
idiot.
fire him.
Great, which made the market lose 3% today. By the way, down to 37,000 and change. The official policy of the United States right now is, one, they can't decide, the administration, what the argument is. Is it what you said, where we're eventually getting these people to come back to us to get to free trade? Or is it
Well,
what
yeah.
Matt and Trump and Navarro have been saying forever, which is, oh, we're going to bring in revenue, we're going to pay
Look,
down our debt.
I'll be the
And
first to admit.
Because
Look,
your argument is totally different than his.
no,
you
no,
do
no,
realize that,
No,
right?
no, it's not totally different. There's
Yes, he's talking
There's
about,
nuances.
he's talking about free trade.
I'm talking about free trade
So
as
is
well.
Elon Musk. But then where's the revenue and manufacturing going to come from?
I think there's a mixture of both here. I think that the real trade, I've said this all along, that the real trade war is going to be with China. That's what we're after here.
There's about 10 countries
Right?
that we truly have
Because
trade with.
ultimately,
Yeah, I don't-
Donald Trump does not want things that are we rely on for national security to be manufactured in China. I think that's what this is going to boil down to. But again, I'm not speaking for President Trump. This is just me as an outsider looking in saying that's what I think. I do think that Trump has a bit of an issue in communications right now because there's people from the White House, unnamed sources, that are saying something on taxes that's different than what he said on the campaign. They didn't come from Trump's mouth. Same on trade. You've got Elon Musk saying one thing and Navarro saying another. It's going to be up to Donald Trump to communicate that to
Well,
the American people.
When you're willing to get off Trump's jock, here's what I'll leave you with. The official policy of this president and of the United States at this point is one of extortion. We have hit
You just had to get that line in.
we
didn't
have
you? You
hit
love that line.
every country, all of our allies. Japan used the word
I saw you.
extortion.
You said to me.
But they
you
might
use the
feel
word
extorted,
extortion.
but guess who had their diplomats
But
on a
here's-
plane the first day to come make a better deal?
And there's no deal. It's not. It's a nothing deal. look at if you look at the EU. If the market thought it was a great deal, you'd see an uptick. And I know what you're going to say next. Oh, those woke.
No,
those
here's what
woke
I'm going
Wall
to say
Street
next. We're out of
investors.
time. I set the 9-minute timer. We're at 19 minutes.
One last statement before he pulls his financial contribution. We are extorting universities. We are extorting law firms. We are extorting countries. When you show up to a business meeting and you say, F you, here's what you're going to do. And if you don't do it, I'm going to hit you with this, and this. That is extortion. That is not a negotiation. So if you think that that's an appropriate way to do business, and that's how we ought to treat our allies, then I think that's a sad state of affairs. It appears you both trust in Trump. You trust in this.
Trust the leadership.
This.
I've said it all along. We are still very, very new in this Trump 2.0 administration. We're going to see how this plays out. We're out of time. Jefferson, you have 30 to 60 seconds. Give a pitch for your business. Why should people hire the Synapse Group? And again, thanks for sponsoring this great event tonight. People seem to be having a great time.
Looks good. I hear
keep
lots
getting
of people
some eyeballs
drivers
looking at us over here debating politics.
I don't know how I'm
only
going
60
to. I don't know
yards
how
out
I'm
over
going to
there.
get out of Oklahoma alive.
Yeah,
I might get shot.
It's not a negotiation when you come to Oklahoma. The only state in the union that had 0 counties that
You may
voted
have an
for
ally
someone
or two
other
in
than
this
Donald
race.
Someone
Trump.
told me Tulsa is purple.
It is. We had
I
two
the-
Democrats run against each other.
Am I
for
the
mayor.
purple stripe that's coming through here?
Yeah.
You would not have been progressive enough to be mayor of Tulsa. That's what.
Oh,
But
no.
Tulsa County
Tulsa County's
voted for
County's-
President
I
Donald
don't think
J.
I
Trump.
could. I don't think I could
The
win
city
the
of
Democratic
Tulsa,
primary.
Trump lost like by a razor's thin margin. It was very, very close.
In Oklahoma, we do have to have this saying: Are they center left of Oklahoma or are they center left of America? Because those are two very different things. But a pitch for the Synapse Group: if you want somebody where you're dealing directly with the president of the company, the person who is running the project is in the state running, managing your folks. If you want somebody who's going to deliver you super high quality, whether that's signatures or canvassers, people who look like your voters, people who are mostly from your state, sourced local labor, we would love to have a discussion and attempt to earn your business.
Well, Jefferson, thanks for sponsoring. Thanks for coming on the
It's a
show.
pleasure.
And thank you to everybody that listens. Please subscribe anywhere you get audio podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Apple. Subscribe to download our episodes. Also on YouTube. We're really taking off on YouTube. I think our last episode is 800 views already. And so things are really going well there. Go to YouTube, subscribe. We appreciate everybody that's listening and supporting our show.